front of the clock.
3,
Live.
2, 1. Are we live?
Hello.
We're live.
Bonjour.
Hey, bonjour.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir, Nelly.
Bonsoir.
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 We have our stripes on, but we are still Hannibal Brown.
And we're going to sit and wait for people to come and join us.
So what are we going to do whilst we're doing that?
Well,
We'll talk to the
well,
dog.
we
We'll
can
introduce
talk to the dog.
Finn the dog.
Be good to know if...
4 years old, loving his wine. A bit more of that in a minute.
Ready for a glass, I'd say.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Just bear with us for just 2 ticks, everybody.
We put on the stripes especially for this evening with our little intro to France and the wines of France and just a bit of basics.
I did think about getting some garlics.
We've only got one bulb. We could dangle it in the middle. Shut down and all that. Finn was going to wear stripes, but he's reluctant to put things over his head these days.
Right then, shall we go? Shall we crack on? It's 6 o'clock. It's Sunday evening. Day, I don't know how many. Is it day 28? Maybe day 27 of lockdown. Hopefully everybody's still holding on in there. So we're bringing you a little bit of light entertainment this evening. And we chose to just talk to you a little bit about France. It's such a huge area. But before I talk about that, I'll just tell you that Hannibal Brown, we are a specialist in organic wine. We are delivering up and down the country every day throughout the lockdown. So if you, your family, your friends, anywhere, in fact, we're delivering to Amsterdam this week. Don't hold back. HannibalBrown.com. Right,
we deliver. So we wanted to talk a bit about the back to basics in French wine because we can and why not, and we've got a nice bottle of French wine here and it'd be nice to share it with you.
Yeah.
So it's a real minefield. When we launched Hannibal Brown back in 2012, Pam has been in the industry a while and that's your entire profession.
Hell of a long time,
your entire
actually.
profession has been based around wine, whereas mine has been sort of boosted by enjoying it as a consumer. But one of the real eye-openers was the amount of information which we all don't know about France, the original classic wine country. But Pam's actually spent a lot of time there.
I have.
And a lot of your career. So maybe tell people a little bit about the places you worked, and then we're going to get to some myth busting.
Okay, well, where to start? I mean, the best thing that I could possibly have ever done throughout my career was to have learned to speak fluent French. And that's half the battle won when you're talking about France, because everybody knows the labels on the wines are a minefield. They are getting better, and we'll talk to you about that in a second. But I cut my teeth at making wine in Chablis, making wine in the south of France, in the Languedoc region, and then sort of scuttled over to South Africa to do something over there. But I've seen the very, very sort of the lovely sort of romantic side as well, and also in Bordeaux. But I've also seen the good and dirty side as well. And what's most important for everybody to remember, the reason why France is a minefield is because one of the biggest producers in the country. It represents over a quarter of the whole of world production. So you get the good, the bad, and the proper ugly. And that is half the problem. So should we talk about labels?
Yeah, well, actually, let's just tell everyone what we're drinking for starters, because we tried to make it really generic by saying, let's go French. So everyone can find a bottle of French wine somewhere, although apparently that's not necessarily the case. But we have got a bottle here from a producer called Guy Allion.
Yeah.
It's a Sauvignon de Touraine, which it does actually say on the label. It mentions Sauvignon, which even for a start for French wines, you don't usually get a glimpse at the grape variety.
Well, this is an example of a producer who suddenly realised that we're in the 21st century and that nobody understands the labels, so he's going to go and slap the grape variety on, which most people do recognise. But back in the day, people will recognise this sort of thing. Now, this is a typical Bordeaux chateau, Chateau Toulouse. It tells you very little. There's no grape variety on there, nothing whatsoever. Only the name of the chateau. The Grave de Ver is the region. And then it's got something down here that says Appellation Grave de Ver Contrôlée. Now, every old French wine used to have to register to these appellations, or they are kind of a certification. And they were kind of a reference to quality. So you had to go through 101 different hoops in order to get to that quality, and then you could deserve to have that appellation reference on your label. So it's a reference to quality.
It's a bit like Wensleydale is to cheese.
Yeah. The other really important thing, and we can't stipulate enough, and this is a real quality mark, is mise en bouteille. It means put in bottle or bottles au chateau, at the chateau. And that is a testament to the quality of the wine. Really, majority of the wines that we do at Hannibal Brown have this sort of, it's a kind of stamp of quality. If it's produced and bottled at the winery, then it doesn't have to go through additional sulfite additives, and everybody's heard about sulfites. Maybe we'll talk about those next week. But used in small quantities, sulfites are fantastic. They're like a sticking plaster for wine. They stop wine from basically going off and turning into vinegar. But some winemakers, and certainly when wines are bottled in the UK or elsewhere other than the winery itself, they have they have additional doses of sulfites added to them. And that's all I'm going to say about sulfites at the moment.
Yeah.
So going back to this dude, the lovely Guy Allion, he makes it really super easy. He puts his name on it, Guy Allion. You can look him up. He puts a grape variety. He goes Sauvignon Blanc. Ooh, I know what Sauvignon Blanc is. And he puts the region, Touraine, in the valley of the Loire. So bloody hell, fantastic.
Butt in for a minute there. Claire has pointed out that the label is back to front. Maybe there's something...
Is it really?
Well, you get the idea. If you look
Here we go. How about that?
I think that's probably upside down and back to front. But
What
if you look,
can do about
just
that?
watch us in the mirror and you'll be fine.
Oh, and yes.
Bonjour, Vicky.
Vicky?
A French resident in London joining us to talk about French wine. If you've got any questions or anything you'd like to add, just do pop a comment on and we'll try and keep track.
Okay.
And any questions, full stop throughout. So shall we just first of all taste the wine?
Yeah, but before we do that, so another thing, when you're pouring the wine, we've just pre-poured this, but we're using these ISO glasses. They are a standard in the wine industry, and they're basically designed so that you can get your nose right in, and you get a concentration of all the aromas and the characteristics, so it's easier to appreciate the wine. You pour to the fattest part of the glass and no further. Well, that's at 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening. Who knows what happens in a couple of hours.
It's a lie. It's all lies.
This is nice and chilled, so off we go. And I'd also like to say happy birthday to all those people who have celebrated their birthday during the lockdown. It's a bit tough. I'm not there yet, but who knows? It could still be going. That's same with my birthday.
Yeah, true. Cheers, everybody. Cheers. Happy Sunday.
And Finn better have a little glass as well. Here you go.
Cheers, Finn.
Cheers, Finn.
You
There we
can't
go.
quite reach.
No, I know, but last time it was dirty.
So French wine. This Sauvignon, which does say where it's from and that it's a Sauvignon, is a Sauvignon de Touraine. So where is Touraine?
In the Loire. The Loire Valley. The lovely Loire Valley. What's the biggest cathedral in the Loire Valley? Anybody know? Come on.
Let's put it out there. And here's another question. Obviously, this is a Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire Valley.
Yes.
Are there other white wines grown in the Loire?
There are. But most importantly, think about white wines in the Loire Valley. They're designed to go with the style of food in the Loire Valley. And there's a lot of crustacea, a lot of oysters and moules, mussels and all sorts. So 9 times out of 10, the wines that you get in the Loire Valley are nice and fresh and dry and just sensationally good with
seafood.
Mm-hmm. You do get super sweet wines as well. Côte de Léon, if you ever find that. But we're not going to talk about that this evening because I don't want to get it confused.
Okay, so it'd be really interesting to know what everyone else is drinking. Let us know if you've managed to get hold of a French wine and what it is. And
so we've got a really good question come up, actually. What's the difference between Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire Valley or France and Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand?
Ooh.
Really good question. So you've got to remember that the Froggies, the lovely French, they've got thousands of years of expertise, whereas the New Zealanders are a lot younger. I mean, they've been going quite a long time, but they are a lot younger. So the Sauvignon Blanc, it's a grape variety, so it grows on vines. And in France, the style is very much, they often use that characteristic of cat's pee. ooh, this doesn't smell of cat's pee.
Really not.
This is nice and fresh and citrusy. The wines in New Zealand, for those, some people will already know this if you're a lover of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, they basically pierce a hole between your eyes here and go poof. They are super concentrated in their style. They can be tropical, but they're very, very grassy. Grass is the key in New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs. We are being quite general here because they're bound to be wineries in New Zealand that are creating wines similar to a Loire style. But generally speaking, they're very grassy. So if you like a big punchy Sauvignon Blanc, then New Zealand's the place for you. Chile is more tropical, more ripe, but also quite big and hard-hitting. Whereas the Sauvignon Blancs from the Loire Valley, a little bit more, what's the word? Oh, I'm looking for a French word.
Subtle?
Subtle, exactly.
Okay, and so we've got a few people who managed to get hold of some French wine. So
Good.
I think that was Steve and Amanda are on the Chablis, which is a very nice choice, obviously.
There's a big question.
Cheers to
Is
that.
Chablis Sauvignon though? Is it? No, of course it's not. Why isn't it?
Well, so we often get the combination of statements that I can't stand Chardonnay, but I love a Chablis. And there is the big contradiction. So Chablis is not a grape, and it's not a brand. It's a place.
It's a tiny little village, a tiny little sleepy village where I spent several months going out of my mind.
Not to do with the wine consumption.
With boredom, but working in a very, very good Chablis winery there called La Roche. If anybody sees that, they will see that in the supermarkets. It's very good. But it's a tiny little village, but it's a bigger region. The key to the Chablis to know Chablis is only producing Chardonnay. They are only allowed to grow Chardonnay as the grape variety. The reason why so many people don't realise is that stylistically that Chardonnay is often quite like Sauvignon Blanc. It's steely, it's minerally, and it's very, very fresh. Some Chablis producers put more oak in it, so they barrel age it, or maybe they put a bit of oak chip in it, and you get more of those sort of Chardonnay buttery characteristics. But generally speaking, it's mineral style.
So when we get people who say, I don't like Australian Chardonnay, is that a fair, sweeping generalisation?
None of these sweeping generalisations are fair.
Loaded question.
None of them are. I mean, as I said, France represents over 25% of world production. So you're always going to get the good, the bad, and the indifferent, or the ugly, as I said. It's all down to the producers. So again, if you say, I love Malbec from Argentina, well, you get great producers of Malbec, and you get awful ones too.
Like everything.
Believe you me, I've tasted some pretty awful Malbec from Argentina.
Yeah, sure. I'm just looking at the comments coming in here, and Vicky, our genuine French attendee here, is on the Saint Christophe from the Languedoc. So the Languedoc, is it a grape?
The Languedoc, everybody knows the Languedoc. Must have been down on holiday to the Languedoc, Montpellier, Béziers, all those lovely areas. It's super hot down there. For those of you that know Languedoc produces twice as much as the whole of Australia. So just that region, again, huge producer. It's lovely going into the Languedoc. Every tiny little village has got its own cooperative. And those cooperatives were put together because everybody in Languedoc had a little parcel of vines in their gardens at one point, and they still do to a degree. And they basically pick those grapes at the point of time of harvest, and they'd take them down to the local cooperative, who would blend them up with everybody else's and make a wine. And they could either buy it back, or they sold it on the local market. Some cooperatives are really good. Some of them aren't so good. It's a bit of a minefield. That's when it becomes a bit of a minefield.
One which I remember coming across when we were down in Burgundy, whilst we were mentioning Chablis, is the cooperative in Chablis is called La Chablisienne.
Oh,
Is
yes.
it Le or La?
La Chablisienne.
You know, I'd get that wrong.
Bien sûr.
And that's a really fantastic cooperative, isn't it? Like a really reliable option if you're in Chablis.
Well, I have to say it is, in actual fact. And I have to put my little supermarket hat on and say, once upon a time, I used to do some work for Marks and Spencer's, and Marks and Spencer's are great believers of La Chablisienne. So if you're like sort of beginners at Chablis, you know, Marks and Spencer's, they do good Chablis. Mm-hmm. So do we, obviously better than them. But if you're going down a supermarket route, go Marks and Spencer's. They won't let you down.
So we've got Rachel watching. She's on the
Rachel?
Saint-Chinion.
Ooh la la, Saint-Chinion. Very
Saint-Chinion.
nice.
That's a label that you'll probably see that gives you very little to go on. It's down in the Languedoc as well.
So again, just going back to these labels, the problem with French wines, as I said,
thing about French wine.
this chap Guy Allion, he's been masterful, joined us in the 21st century and put his name on it and put the grape on it. The majority of wines don't. The majority of them do look something like this. So, Saint-Chinion is a town, again down in the Languedoc area, not very far from Béziers. They are renowned for making lovely, big, fruity red wines with Carignan. It's a great variety. Mourvèdre, Grenache, Syrah. They're big and structured. They go great with steak. People in the Saint-Chinion region, they do like their steak. It's very hot down there, so often the wines don't necessarily age for too long, because when you get a very hot climate, you don't get as much acidity in the fruit and in the eventual wine. And without acidity, the wine falls apart. And a lot of you will know us because for putting food pairings together, and we always bang on about the importance of having acidity in your wine. If you don't have acidity in your wine, it turns into nothing. What's our greatest hate? I hope we haven't got any Italians on this call.
Pinot Grigio.
Pinot Grigio. A great example of very little to it. Totally inoffensive, but nothing to it.
So then, if we're talking about the Languedoc, we've talked about all these lovely red grape varieties. Is it so warm then that they don't really produce white wine down there?
They do produce a lot of white wine in actual fact, and they're producing the usual suspects, the Sauvignons, the Chardonnays, but again, on those labels, you won't necessarily see the grape varieties. You will see the names of the villages. So going back to Chablis, the village, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, a village.
Not in the Languedoc,
Côte d'Rône, a region. It's a region, not a producer.
So actually, looking down at the Languedoc, one of our best-selling wines down there is something that you've probably heard of, and it'd be really great if someone was drinking it right now, is the famous, soon to be famous, Picpoul de Pinet. Lots of people have heard of it, lots of people love it. It's a white wine. Yeah. It's like the France's answer to the new Sauvignon Blanc, or that's what they were trying to make it.
Yeah.
Picpoul is the grape, and then Pinet is the village, and it's only produced in this very small little area. But I think it's about 80% is drunk in the UK, is that right?
Yes.
So we are lovers of it, and definitely recommend getting a bottle because it's fantastic.
Yeah, the nice thing about Picpoul de Pinet, if you find it, you'll see it on our website. It's in a nice long bottle. It's a little bit softer, slightly less acidic than Sauvignon Blanc, even though Picpoul, if you sort of absolute translation is lip stinger or something close to that. But those are the days when they got a lot more acidity in the wine because it's so hot there, and a lot of that is to do with climate change. Because it's so hot down there now, they don't get quite so much acidity, but they get a lot of fruit. The French love Picpoul, but as Jude says, 80% of it is actually sold here. But so much so, the French love it so much so that there is a rumour, and I think there's some truth to this, that it was considered at one point that the whole of France would grub up all of their Sauvignon Blanc grapes or vines and replace them with Picpoul. And it would be a lovely thing to do. We gave them a real point of difference, but I can't really see it.
But the entire Loire Valley might be put up in arms about that.
Yeah. Have we got any questions?
We do actually. Faye was asking, going back to talking about the warm weather and red wine,
yes.
Does that mean that in the UK we're never really going to make it with bother growing red wine.
Well, we do produce red wine, and again, the climate change is suggesting that certainly in the last few years they have actually successfully produced some red wine. I do know a couple of wineries who are making noble grape varieties, so Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah, probably those three in actual fact, but they're growing it in greenhouses, and there they can sort of, simulate a slightly sort of warmer climate and what have you. But the biggest challenge in the UK is that our soil is actually quite rich, and vines really don't like rich soil. So they tend to want to sort of like they need proper sort of gnarly soil, because those what do you call them? Roots. I always forget the word roots. Spent too much time in France. The roots delve deeper and deeper and deeper to get greater nutrients and what have you. Whereas in the UK they don't, and so they don't get quite as much rigour, and therefore sort of lack a little bit of character. But it is a challenge producing red wine in the UK. Anybody who's in the sort of Epsom Surrey area, which we are, in September go down to Denbies. You can drive straight through the vineyards, and last year it was great to see those vines were absolutely covered in Pinot Noir red grapes. But I've been through there before and there's nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it's a proper gamble producing wine in this country.
So Toby, who's just joined us, is very lucky because they are enjoying a glass of Chevry Chambertin.
Oh!
Ooh la la.
Chevry Chambertin. So for those of you who recognise that name, some of you will think, oh, is that a grape? Is that an area? Well, again, consistent with those rules in France, Chevry Chambertin is a tiny little village in Burgundy. And just like Chablis or any other white producing region in Burgundy, they only produce Chardonnay. Burgundy is all Chardonnay for white grapes, for white wines, and all Pinot Noir for red grapes. That is it. There is nothing else. So if you love Pinot Noir, you can delve into Burgundy and you can be proper. I don't know what to say about that, but a Chevry Chambertin is a pretty expensive wine, but hey ho, what the hell.
Enjoy, Toby. Cheers. Yeah,
I hope you're enjoying
to that.
Burgundy is a bit of a minefield because quality changes from vintage to vintage, and it really, really does change from vintage to vintage. You can get seriously burnt buying very expensive bottles of Burgundy and be utterly disappointed. Equally, they can be fantastic. But don't assume that just one vintage, because one vintage is good, the next vintage is going to be good. I've had the most horrendous experiences and the most wonderful experiences. But to be honest, I don't really buy Burgundy anymore because I've been burnt too many times. I'd rather go to somewhere like Australia or Chile,
South
Africa, where the climate is more consistent. That's the problem with Burgundy. The climate isn't consistent. It's a little bit like here. You never know from one year to the next.
How good your tomatoes are going to be.
Exactly. So anyway, so what I'd like to know, Toby, what is that Chevry Chambertin and what vintage is it? Because vintage is really important. Again, with Burgundy, top Burgundy, it needs time. If it's drunk too soon, it's like throwing water down. It's throwing your wine down the toilet. It's a bit pointless. I do remember I used to work, I'm not sure I should name him. Oh, what the hell. John Terode. Everybody knows John Terode.
Yeah.
We used to work together. He was a commie little chef when I worked with him. But when he became rich and famous, I remember him bringing a bottle of Louis Roederer Cristal champagne to a lunch and being utterly disappointed. He spent £180 on this bottle of champagne from Cristal, and it was just too young. It was just too young.
Such a waste.
Same with champagne, vintage champagne, where there's a vintage on it. It needs time.
It's also got
our
to be
Champagne de Ville
Yeah.
is 2005 vintage at the moment. In actual fact, I think we've run out of it, and they haven't declared another vintage yet. So that's 15 years ago, and there's nothing coming through yet.
I think that on that point, it's quite a good note that, as well as not drinking them too young, it's a travesty when you've kept something and it's gone over the hill and down the other side.
And we've had plenty of
It
them.
happened to us very recently with a really nice bottle of Bordeaux that we had and we've been holding on to. Suddenly thought, oh, actually, we should really crack this open, and it was utterly disappointing.
Yeah. So, just one last thing, because we won't keep you any longer. Faults in wine. So, everybody's heard about cork fault. You rarely get cork faults these days. Back in the 90s, it ran around about 26% of all wine in varying levels was corked. Most of it went unnoticed, but it was corked, so it had a taint to it. And there's no turning back. You can't do anything about it. Once the wine is cork tainted, that's it. It will only get worse. These days, corked wine runs at less than 0.1%, so it's very rare. However, it still happens. And this week, in actual fact, we had two wines in a week that smelt of acetone, like nail polish remover. And that's nasty. That is a reference to oxidation. That is the beginning of your wine turning to vinegar.
And nail varnish remover at the same time.
Exactly, because it's the same bacteria that you get in acetic acid, and it gives off that nasty acetone
just
taste.
like nail polish remover, isn't it? It's just like
so if you ever notice it, give us a shout. We're always interested in tainted wines.
Yes.
Tainted wines.
There's a song in there. Actually, Luke and Simon they're drinking the Pierre Frick Sylvana, which is a really delicious 2012 vintage, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
Sylvana is the grape variety, and it's from Alsace, which is the little region up near, sort of between Champagne and Germany, I suppose, isn't it? And they've said that they remade the salmon tartare canapé that we talked about for last week, which we then paired with the Albarino.
Yes.
And they said it's a really nice combination again. And actually that Riesling, and all Riesling... Sylvana. Alsace Riesling Sylvana. That Sylvana has got this lovely, soft, almost honeyedness to it. And that with the oiliness of the salmon, I reckon would work really well. So well done, guys. I'm kind of a bit hungry and quite jealous.
Yeah, one last thing actually. Sylvana is not a very well-known grape variety to in the UK, but it's lovely. If you see a Sylvana, we've got Pierre Frick Sylvana on the system on HannibalBrown.com website. But it's a really, really lovely grape variety. So check it out.
And actually, going to Alsace, because Alsace is a region that's very different to the Loire and Burgundy and the Côte d'Or, isn't it?
Yeah.
For starters, if you're there, you probably think you're in Germany or Austria.
Apart from the croissants, they're awful.
Oh, well, yeah. So really not very French at all. I wonder what...
It looks German.
It looks German. It's a chocolate box, lovely region, and it's beautiful, and you have to go. And the wines there are stunning, but they're very, very different to the rest of France.
Yeah.
The bottles are almost always long, tall Riesling bottles.
I don't think we've got one here.
And B, they usually tell you what the grape variety is on the label.
They do. So Sylvana, Riesling, Gewürztraminer. That's another grape variety. Very, very aromatic. Anybody who likes sort of floral aromatics in their wines, Gewürztraminer is one for you. I used to drink bucket loads of that. But so much so that I made myself a bit ill on it, and I don't touch it anymore. But if you like that style, it's Gewürztraminer is for you.
Another good question here: grower champagne or vintage champagne? Now, most people wouldn't know the difference.
It's easy.
Most people wouldn't know the difference. I mean, what is a grower champagne and what's a vintage champagne? In fact, what's a non-vintage champagne?
Actually, I don't really understand the question. But a vintage champagne or a grower's champagne?
Well, I think the answer is... So a grower's champagne, and correct me if I'm wrong here,
is
small producers. They're the champagnes that aren't the Veuve, they aren't the Moet, they're not Dom Perignon. They're small artisan producers who are producing fantastic wines that you just don't see in the supermarkets. Ours, Jean-Paul Deville, is absolutely phenomenally good value and fantastic.
Yeah.
Non-vintage. So that's just a champagne that uses three years worth of wine to blend together to keep a sort of constant quality.
Yeah.
Vintage is the wine produced in that year. So the 2005 vintage, the grapes were harvested in 2005 and the wine was produced from that year because it was a bloody good year and they're claiming that as a vintage, right?
Yeah.
Non-vintage is very much an ongoing, constant, reliable, go-to drinking champagne.
Yeah.
So I would say, my answer to that question is, go grow a champagne unless it's a special occasion or you've come into money, then go vintage. But go good vintage, not just high street.
Yeah, very important. If you've got champagne in your house and it says non-vintage and you've had it for 10 years, drink it, because it's not designed to last. It's not designed to hold on to. So often I know people who go, oh, what about this? I've got a bottle of Veuve Clicquot with a big yellow label. Everybody recognises it. And they've had it there for 15 years and they go, oh, what's that going to taste like? Oh, it's going to be shot to pieces. Non-vintage champagne is not to sit on. It's released and designed to be drunk there and then. Vintage champagnes, whether you've got the number, the 2005 or whatever that name is, that is, as Jude says, that is a reference to the year that they were produced in, that it was produced in, and they need time to mature. Here we go. Here comes one. Here comes one she's prepared earlier.
Squeeze past the dog.
Oh dear, my good friend Sarah Hicks from Pommery would love this.
So here we go. Look
at this beauty.
Really badly promoting wines that we don't sell. But this is a really nice example. This is a vintage champagne. It's 1995.
Oh, and it's upside
in
down,
a very fancy
back to
box.
front.
From Pommery, the producer. And on there, I'm going to point at it, but there's no point in putting it too close because we just won't be able to see it.
And it's back to
there
front.
There you go. It's back to front. So it was 59.91.
59.91, but actually 1995. Still sitting on it. It should be drinking pretty nicely now, but we could actually hold it for a lot longer.
We should wait for a special occasion at least.
Well, now that it's out the box, it's
put it back
there.
in. Hi Jill, by the way, nice to see you. Jill's just joined us.
Okay.
From presumably a sunny boat in Hampton, I'd say. What are you drinking, Jill, when you get the message? And also to Luke, what a shame we booked Simon a tour of the Alsace for a Christmas present in June.
Oh.
Christmas present in June.
Fingers crossed, you never know, you might get there.
You never know. And it really is a stunning place to visit. And I recommend it massively.
Yeah.
Every house dry white wine is a Riesling or a Silvaner, and it's lovely.
Yeah.
And if you get the Magnum, so the Riesling bottles are tall and thin, and the Magnum bottles are twice as tall. So for pure sort of novelty value, it's worth.
So I just want to go back to the names of these wines on the labels, because this is so important.
Go on.
So I mentioned Chablis. So Chablis is the name of the village and the region. Mm-hmm. So it's not a reference to the individual producer. It's a reference to the region. So you've got to dig deeper into that label to work out whether that's going to be a good one or a bad one. Mm-hmm. So you have to look beneath the name, beneath the word Chablis, to see at the bottom what the name of the producer is. I know it's really difficult when you go into supermarkets, but it's so much easier when you come to Hannibal Brown, because we'll tell you whether it's good or not. In fact, we don't list anything that's not good. That's all there is to it.
It's true.
But look at the name on the bottom of the label, and then look it up and see what everybody says about it. Another good example, Sancerre. Sancerre, is it a village? Is it a grape?
Let's maybe put it out there, but hopefully by now people will have got the gist.
It's the same as Chablis. It's a little village. Puy-Fumé, same thing. Mm-hmm. Little village just across the road from Sancerre. Puy-Fuissé, that's another one in Burgundy.
Which happened to
tell me another one.
And here's one.
Go on.
There's a town, just to complicate things further, there is a little town in Burgundy called Chardonnay, isn't there?
Oh, there is.
There's always
there is one little village called Chardonnay in France, in Burgundy, and funnily enough, they
produce Chardonnay. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So at least that one's obvious, if it's none of the others.
But so yes, there's Sancerre. Remember Châteauneuf-du-Pape. Give me another one. There are loads of them. Menetou Salons, another one.
We say Pouligny-Montrachet, there's one that keeps haunting me.
Pouligny-Montrachet, Gevrey-Chambertin we had.
Yeah.
So all of these are references to the name of the little village from where those wines came from. And as I said, you've got to look a bit further. The only difference with Bordeaux is they refer to theirs from their chateau. So it's all Bordeaux, but it's a different chateau. That tells you whether it's a good chateau or not. You can look it up. But again, the references to the vintage. Some vintages are better than others. And in actual fact, a nice easy way of looking at Bordeaux is that every 5 years, all the fives all happen to have been great vintages since 1985. So 1985, great vintage. 1990, 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010. They've all been great vintages. Just think of the fives when you're looking at Bordeaux.
Rule of thumb. And is that actually the same for Rioja as well?
No.
Ah.
No.
There you go. You can't... It's a totally different country. The climate would have been totally different.
Is Rioja in Spain?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, and just because I thought I was asking if the same rule applied to different wines.
No.
So you've got to be very specific.
That's just a reference to Bordeaux.
And not even the same. It's not even the same rule in Burgundy.
No, because different climate. I mean, the Burgundians have, well, they have produced good wines in those years, but they're different. But that was just a nice little clue. So if you like your Bordeaux, look at the fives.
Go for the fives.
Yeah,
and then you'll probably get a bargain on the fours.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's true.
And there'll probably be a reason why, I guess.
Okay, I think we're going to call it a day there because, we've got an awful lot of wine to drink. We've got to have some roast chicken this evening.
So what we ask from you guys, please share our vids with any wine indulging friends of yours. These little tastings and videos, we would like to get as much interaction as possible. So if you can share them with your mates, that'd be great. It's a bit of a laugh. Hopefully we can answer a few questions.
Yep.
Oh, actually, before we go, we must answer the question. So, quick one is, thanks, Rachel. Quick one is, what's the difference between a Reserva and a Grand Reserva in Rioja?
Oh, that's another day. We're talking about France today.
Okay. All right. We'll leave that for Spain. But thank you very much for your question, Toby, anyway. And the answer to you, Steve, is we've only just had a little snifter whilst we've been talking to you guys. So hopefully that was interesting. Hope you enjoyed it. Obviously, if you want to buy some lovely French wine, you can come to our website, hannibalbrown.com.
Yeah.
Or just give us a call and tell us what you like, and we'll tell you something similar that you maybe haven't heard of, but would nudge you in a better direction.
Absolutely. And another quick shout out, because all of our events have sadly been cancelled for the foreseeable. We put together a whole lot of DIY tasting kits. Again, log on to hannibalbrown.com. All the information is there, and we're doing another one of these little conversations on Thursday
as Rachel's just
7
mentioned.
o'clock this week, 7 p.m.
Rachel's just mentioned she'll see us on Thursday if her wine arrives on time. Your wine will arrive on time. Well, we're getting all orders out within a couple of days at the moment. Sometimes even same day if you happen to live in Wimbledon or Surrey.
Yeah.
So we can
not
get the
obligatory,
wines.
but we can do it. So bye.
We'll get your wines to you, and we'll see you on Thursday. Cheers, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Finn says cheers. Good boy. That's a good boy.
He's bored out of his mind.
He doesn't like it. He's over it.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye.